Annie is going to introduce the depth project to you. And then we're going to show a video as Dr. Cuisle Fords is on leave. She created a video for us that we can use, and we're going to show you a section of that video that focuses in on aspects of clinical practice that were digitally assessed and how that was done. And after that, then Annie is going to outline some of the research that they carried out, or the outcomes of the research. So without further ado, I think I'll hand over to Annie.
Thank you so much. So I'll just share my screen now. Perfect. So hi everybody. Thank you so much, Katrina, for inviting me today and for having me. So I'm Annie O'Brien. I'm a research assistant in the Department of Physiotherapy, working with Dr. Cuisle Fords, who has designed and developed DEPTH, which is a research project that is exploring digitally enhanced practical skill teaching, learning and assessment in the health sciences. So this project was very much developed and carried out in partnership with students. So the student voice has been a huge component, as has the voice of stakeholders and research or academic staff. So the DEPTH project took part across 4 stages, beginning in September and running through until May. So I'll be presenting some of the research from stage 2, but just to give you an overview of the DEPTH project as a whole. So the very first phase was exploring the opportunities and barriers to digitally enhanced practical skill teaching, learning and assessment. And we explored these through an extensive literature review, which Katrina has just mentioned there. We were very excited. It was just published last week. I can include the reference in the chat if anybody is interested in looking at it in some more detail. And then to further explore the opportunities and barriers, we also carried out an online survey. And we were very interested in analysing the student and staff perspectives of digitally enhanced practical skill teaching, learning and assessment. And so very much understanding staff and student experiences, their personal opinions and their attitudes towards this teaching method and assessment method. And so we did this through an online survey, as well as to gain further insight and detail. We carried out focus groups and interviews, so informal chats, to really ensure we were gaining a holistic understanding of the student and staff experience. We had the 3rd phase of the DEPTH project, which explored, I guess we wanted to identify what was the superior teaching method. Is it a face-to-face teaching approach, an online teaching approach, or a blended teaching approach? And we did this by teaching 2 practical skills to students and randomly assigning them to these 3 different learning methods. And it appeared that there was a significant improvement in student competency and confidence for those within the blended learning group and the face-to-face teaching group. So it shows that there is a place for digitally enhanced practical skill teaching, but more so focusing on assessment today. I'll move on to the 4th stage, which is development of an online educational resource. And this will be a resource available on a global scale for staff and students to help support them in, I guess, the teaching, learning and assessment of practical skills using technology. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about the OER later. But I guess before presenting the research findings, as Katrina mentioned, we'll be presenting Dr. Cuisle Fords' video of her experiences of assessing practical skills online. So just to give a brief overview, Cuisle helped develop the postgraduate diploma in clinical exercise, and this is a diploma for healthcare clinicians to help support them prescribing exercise for disease prevention and treatment. So it's a fully online postgraduate course, and the assessment methods include multiple choice questionnaires, essay questions, reflective reports, and then interestingly, video submissions of practical skills. So Cuisle was able to gain insight into the limitations and the possibilities of digitally enhanced practical skill assessment. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll let Katrina share that video now.
we're quite happy with it, that will remain a part of our course. Then moving on to the diploma, for those practical skills, the other element of assessments are very similar to what we did in the cert, the MCQs and the essays and case studies. The difference is this aspect of acquiring practical skill. So we address that by asking students to upload a video of them, again demonstrating a practical skill. This again relies on the informed consent of a third party, so that's one of the limitations. They've about 4 weeks to complete it. It's very useful at determining their ability, and although we've only been running this is our second year now, my experience is that they haven't overly polished or practiced their submissions. So the fear would be that they would do it again and again and again until they have this perfect video that looks excellent. And in my experience, that's not necessarily the case. And if it was, it would be wonderful learning for the students to see the submission that they're going to submit and start to realize their own maybe slight mistakes or where things are unclear for them. But my experience is that it's quite easy to determine their ability from that video submission. Having said that, we do go on and ask them to demonstrate their skill live. So last year we were obliged to do this online. We didn't record it because of the reliance on a third party. The difference being that for a video submission, the third party could watch the video and consent exactly to what was being submitted, but with a live recording they wouldn't be able to do that. So we decided not to record. Now that may have been an opportunity lost in terms of our ability to rewind and rewatch the exam and be more confident in our feedback to students. It does require still informed consent from a third party to take place, and the range of accessible skills was more limited. So given that this was taking place in either the home or clinical workplace of our students, who were all postgraduate clinicians, it was not possible to assess certain skills which required equipment or space that was not accessible to that student. So we spoke to the students beforehand about the venue and what they had available to them, and from that we were able to taper or give a realistic list of accessible skills. So that was a limitation. However, for the skills we did assess, ability was quite evident. Again, I was surprised at how easy it was over video to adequately assess practical competencies. It's not what we will choose going forward. We are hoping this year to get people back in the laboratory, and I think in fact it was possibly harder on students. They did have the option to come to the laboratory, and none of them chose to be assessed in our laboratory. They all chose to be assessed in their own workplace. That in itself, I felt, empowered them and made them more relaxed. They were in an environment that they were the masters of. They knew where all their equipment was. They were used to using the equipment. It was their space, and that really added to the situation for them, and it was a great advantage to them, and that came across. The confidence came across. Where it lacked or where it was limited was in our ability to really see specifics of what was going on, to read a manometer, to zoom in on things was not as easy as it would have been in person. And I do believe that had they had more time in the laboratory, it may have been easier for them to hit certain things that we were looking for in their competencies. Having said that, I was happy to stand over the competencies assessed in our students, and that was what we were going for as let's say the lowest bar of this online assessment, and that was certainly, I felt, achieved quite well. So final thoughts. Overall, it's been successful with positive student feedback.
Perfect. So I'll just share my screen again and resume to the depth research findings. So just to give some context, we captured the staff and student voice across the health science faculty, And the participants represented each of the health science disciplines. So this is just a word cloud to, I guess, illustrate that. So we asked staff and students about their thoughts, experiences, and their attitudes towards digitally enhanced practical skill assessment. So in terms of what are the opportunities presented by this assessment method, and we found that there was objectivity, flexibility, and then a student preference for digitally enhanced, I guess, video skill demonstrations. What are the barriers to digitally enhanced practical skill assessment? There's difficulty identifying the appropriate method for assessment. And then what about assessment integrity? And then I just want to touch on moving forwards, what we're learning from this and how we can improve, I guess, practical skill assessment in this kind of post-COVID era. So an opportunity presented by digitally enhanced practical assessment, it allows for objectivity, and this is something that staff reported. So teaching staff described the ability to pause and rewind pre-recorded submissions as a feature that allowed them to accurately grade the competency and they provide feedback to the student so they could review and assess the performance in detail. So one staff member said, "What I think was good about it is you have the ability to stop, rewind, go again, because you always have to give the student the benefit of the doubt that maybe you just missed something. So sometimes you're giving someone an extra mark rather than putting them down. Also, you have that ability of having a second assessor come in and do it as well. So, there might be benefits to having some things digitally assessed in that manner and a bit of objectivity to it." So a second opportunity that was provided is that it gives students flexibility. So educators perceived students as more prepared and confident than usual and more prepared for what to expect. And I think we can all appreciate that assessments are always a daunting experience. So any opportunity to give students a little bit of, I guess, freedom, as Cuisle said, empowerment to be in their own environment and reduce that assessment anxiety. So something, as we spoke to students, we kind of felt that this improved confidence might be due to the students' ability to control their exam environment. So students described feeling more relaxed and reduced assessment anxiety when carrying out an assessment at home. So one student said, "The use of MS Teams when carrying out an oral patient consultation worked okay, as it's very similar to how it would be in person. Yet being in the comfort of your home while doing it made it slightly less stressful." So a third opportunity was, interestingly, this seemed to be a preferred method of digital assessment when compared to maybe online essay writing or MCQs. So one student said, "I like the recorded practical because you have to perform it and you're either going to get it right or I'm going to be wrong." And I asked, "So you feel it's more accurate representation of your knowledge?" And he responded, "I do. I would also find talking your way through it as opposed to writing about it might even be beneficial for the student. Before, I was just going through the motions. When I actually had to explain it verbally, I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense." So I'm a big fan of the recorded assessment. I think it's better for the students, more helpful to the examiner as well. And I think that's an interesting point. It hits off what Cuisle was saying, where you lack that ability to zoom in, but perhaps if the student is verbally describing what they're doing, that can kind of be a way of overcoming that challenge. So I'm just going to touch off some of the challenges that did arise. And that is for staff, a difficulty identifying an appropriate assessment method. So we had 41 staff members complete the online survey, and 56% of these staff members reported not carrying out digitally enhanced assessment methods. And one of the reasons for this, reported by 39% of staff, was they struggled to identify an appropriate assessment method to use. And then 13% lacked confidence in using a digital technology for assessment. So I think really being mindful of what supports are in place for staff in terms of that continuous professional development, how accessible that is, and also whether there's anything in place to help guide staff in identifying and choosing an appropriate assessment method. So I'll touch on that a little bit in the moving forward section. And then concern around the integrity of online assessment. And I think this was really striking across the participant, the staff voice, as well as the student voice. So one staff member said, "The integrity of online assessment has been a major concern in the School of Medicine. I think it's a big fear in our school in particular, about standing over online assessments. And I think if we really just put this in context of the COVID-19 pandemic, when there was that sudden abrupt pivot to online practical skill learning and assessment, and a lot of, I don't want to say pressure, but maybe a lot of that responsibility was placed on the educator to choose a teaching method and an assessment method, and there mightn't have been strategies in place. Understandably, it was all very quick. So as well, poor setup of equipment during remote assessment. So for example, poor positioning of a camera that doesn't allow the staff member to see what the student is doing, or poor lighting, again, not allowing a good visual or quality of a video skill demonstration. It led to difficulties discreetly verifying measurements taken by a student. So I guess just a lack of ability to accurately assess the competency of the student. And then in terms of the student voice, they were worried that examiners were not able to accurately, I guess, appraise skill competency through a webcam, resulting in difficulty receiving an accurate grade. So it's integrity from a school perspective, a staff perspective, and then students wondering, am I competent? Are you sure I'm competent? So moving forward, I guess really just emphasizing the importance of standardization and having a strategy in place as we move forward. So one staff member said, "I believe this is the future of learning," and they were referring to digitally enhanced practical skill teaching and assessment. However, we need a coherent learning and assessment strategy for staff and for students. So developing an online assessment strategy, something like this to support staff decision making and then promote student confidence in the assessment process. And then creating interdisciplinary guidelines. So an example of this might be detailing how to successfully set up equipment. And that will support students in recording high quality skill demonstrations. And it then might as well improve student trustworthiness of remote grading. And this can be at a school level, a discipline level, or faculty level, or perhaps even an educator providing resources that students can use, because I guess we are in a culture of influencing and social media where a lot of people have a really great phone where they can record really great high quality videos, but it's just ensuring the situation is correct or the setting is correct. So videos on YouTube to help to help students record high quality videos it can be a small step that can really support and help that assessment process. And then the availability of an evidence-based educational resource. So this is kind of bouncing back to the fourth stage of the depth project. So the availability of an evidence-based resource that educators can refer to guide them when evaluating the suitability of a digitally enhanced tool for teaching or for assessment. And then in terms of a practical skill, whether a skill is suitable for digitally enhanced teaching or assessment. So that's something that Cuisle and I are currently developing. There's actually a QR code there that you can scan with your phone, and you can see now we're in the early processes of developing that resource. It will be ready for the end of May, but even if you just want to have a look at what that might look like for staff and students. So I guess a free resource that will provide an evidence base of what we're learning so far from the COVID-19 pandemic to improve assessment methods moving forward. So yeah, that's kind of where the depth research is at the moment. So